Could I quickly see a show of hands from those who have heard of Tencent? Great. To begin with, if you examine the world's most valuable corporations, you will not be surprised to encounter names such as Apple, Microsoft, and Google. However, one name truly stands out: Tencent. This company is worth more than Facebook, MasterCard, and Samsung combined. Yet if you asked most people what Tencent actually does, you would likely be met with confusion. The reality is that Tencent's activities span a vast array of industries. While their mascot is a friendly penguin, a more fitting symbol would be a colossal octopus with tentacles stretching into nearly every sector across the globe. Tencent usually operates behind the scenes in many countries, which explains why it is not a household name outside China. Whether you realize it or not, there is a high chance you use products or services linked to Tencent. However, inside Tencent's home country, the situation is very different. Everyone knows exactly how much Tencent dominates daily life in China because it offers a rare feat: one app to rule them all. The Chinese company that worries others the most is Tencent. Due to WeChat's presence in China, living without it is virtually impossible. It influences every part of life, from banking and gaming to shopping and social media. It is so vital to daily routines that one business leader compared it to essential utilities like water or electricity. In essence, Tencent created an ecosystem that people simply cannot live without. There is an app called WeChat that many refer to as the all-in-one app or the operating system of China, because nearly all of China's 1,400,000,000 people use this app for about 4 hours each day. This duration surpasses the time the average American spends on all social media platforms combined. The reason WeChat is so widely used in China is that it combines nearly every application you can imagine into a single platform. It acts like Facebook, PayPal, WhatsApp, Netflix, Google, Spotify, Uber, Yelp, Tinder, Zoom, YouTube, Deliveroo, Amazon, and many others all gathered into one app. Undoubtedly, this level of convenience is impressive. Everything is linked in one place under one profile. Users can pay bills, contact friends, and essentially manage their entire daily lives through WeChat. However, there is a significant downside to one company having access to all of your personal data, from your precise location to your complete banking history and every message, call, and search you have ever made. This concentration of information is enormous. It becomes even more concerning once you understand that the boundary between Tencent and the Chinese government is vague, which means the Chinese Communist Party, not a personal name, so not replaced, also has access to all this data. This situation makes WeChat one of the most powerful surveillance tools ever developed. Additionally, private chats and images sent via Tencent's apps like WeChat are monitored to determine if they require censorship. If you say anything that the Chinese government does not want you to do that, in the best possible outcome, your message simply never reaches its destination. In the worst case, you might end up imprisoned or mysteriously vanish. For instance, one individual made a casual joke about a government official to some friends and soon found himself behind bars for that message. It almost appears as though the CCP wants people to realize this to deter them from even attempting to express opinions that the authorities dislike initially, because the Chinese government has openly admitted it can access deleted WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced, chats without the user's permission or court approval. Of course, as we know from Snowden's "A Historic Real Person" keeps original revelations, governments spying on their citizens using technology is not exclusive to China. However, China has undoubtedly pushed this surveillance to unprecedented extremes. Amnesty International, organization name, not replaced, a group dedicated to human rights, conducted an investigation into how messaging apps handle user data. They found that Tencent was the worst offender by a significant margin, being the sole company to score absolutely 0 out of 100 for its data management. This rating stems from critical transparency issues and unclear data handling policies, plus the undeniable fact that it provides the CCP with backdoor access to all encrypted communications. Naturally, nearly all Chinese corporations must maintain some form of connection with the CCP to operate and thrive legally, but Tencent stands out because of the extent and explicit nature of these ties. Tencent has been permitted to dominate entire sectors within China and employs ruthless methods to eliminate rivals without any regulatory intervention. However, in return for this liberty, some argue they have become an instrument for the Chinese government. It is believed the CCP has thousands of members within Tencent, including party representatives on the Tencent executive board who wield influence over company decisions. For instance, during the first wave of the COVID crisis, the Chinese government utilized WeChat to enforce population control by assigning color codes that indicated people's health status and determined their permissions, such as whether they were allowed to leave their residences. Another example involves directives for Tencent to modify their games to align with Communist Party values, as well as to incorporate facial recognition features, restricting children's gaming time to a maximum of 90 minutes daily. If you think this does not concern you, reconsider that Tencent's mission is to connect individuals and integrate everything visible. After establishing their monopoly in China, they expanded internationally, embarking on one of history's most extensive acquisition sprees. Their investments span major companies such as Reddit, Tesla, Discord, Spotify, Snapchat, and Universal Music, among hundreds of others outside China. Moreover, Tencent holds the position of the largest gaming company worldwide by revenue. Tencent's dominance is exceptionally greater than any other competitor. This becomes especially astonishing when you consider that gaming is merely one of the multitude of industries Tencent operates within. Yet the gaming branch alone surpasses the entire revenues of companies like Nintendo or EA. The core reason for Tencent's superiority in gaming lies in owning the complete rights to Riot Games, the creators of League of Legends, plus owning 40% of Epic Games, the developers behind Fortnite. Additionally, Tencent holds stakes in Ubisoft, Activision Blizzard, and numerous other globally renowned game creators. The same pattern extends to different sectors. For instance, Tencent's payment division rivals the entire business volume of PayPal. It is reported that WeChat Pay handles over 1 billion payment transactions daily, exceeding those processed by Visa and MasterCard combined. Tencent also dominates music streaming services, maintains a strong presence in the esports arena, and has recently ventured into producing Hollywood films such as Men in Black. In the music segment alone, the company reportedly earns $400 to $500 million in profit. This illustrates how challenging it is to fully comprehend the massive scale of Tencent. Only lately has the Western world begun to recognize the extensive influence Tencent and, more broadly, China wield. One revealing instance involved Blizzard, the creators of World of Warcraft, partially owned by Tencent, banning a player who supported the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. This incident illustrated how China appeared to utilize Tencent as a tool to impact decisions beyond its borders, raising widespread concerns about the reach and power of this corporation. A Chinese firm now appears to be controlling what individuals in the United States can express. A similar situation occurred with the NBA. Tencent holds a contract with the NBA to broadcast their games, but in the year 2019, Daryl Morey, the Houston Rockets general manager, posted a tweet saying, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." Following this, Tencent announced they would no longer air any Rockets games. Shortly afterward, the manager was compelled to remove his supportive message regarding Hong Kong, retract his position, and issue an apology for his unsuitable tweets. Subsequently, players publicly expressed their admiration for China, saying, "Yeah, we apologize. We love China. We love playing here." While lately some have questioned whether China could leverage Tencent to sway matters internationally, it seems this influence is already in effect. Various governments ranging from the United States to India have classified WeChat as a security risk, with some even labeling it a surveillance tool carried in one's pocket. Turning to a significant move by the Trump administration, social media platforms TikTok and WeChat were banned from American app stores. Last month, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order targeting this application due to security concerns. One of the most intriguing facets of Tencent's history is that it can be seen in two distinct lights. On one side, Tencent represents one of the most impressive business achievements ever, as the company once had merely $1,000 in its bank account. The story of the journey of a group of friends transforming their struggling startup into one of the largest companies in the world is truly inspiring and packed with valuable insights and brilliant business tactics. What they have accomplished is incredibly impressive, and it is reasonable to argue that Tencent has been unfairly caught in the middle of a political whirlwind they never wished to be involved in. However, Tencent is frequently associated with controversy as well, such as ruthless, monopolistic actions aimed at crushing competitors, blatant imitation involving outright copying from other businesses and applications, severe censorship, and accusations concerning privacy violations and restrictions on freedom of expression. Moreover, concerns about poor working conditions have been raised, and multiple nations now consider Tencent a national security threat due to its close relationship with the Chinese government. I want to emphasize that dismissing Tencent merely as a puppet of the CCP would be unjust. In fact, the Chinese government is currently inflicting harm on Tencent's business, responsible for wiping out hundreds of billions of dollars from Tencent's market value. This scenario brings up even more perplexing questions about why the CCP would be undermining one of its most valuable assets. Clearly, Tencent's story is complex and multifaceted, containing both positive and negative elements, along with several surprising twists. To be honest, I have covered numerous business stories, but Tencent stands out as one of the most captivating. In this video, we will embark on a journey exploring Tencent's incredible saga. Let us explore the story behind a colossal business empire, a company that wields enormous influence, yet is seldom discussed. How did it rise to such prominence? What are its future intentions? Most importantly, what consequences will these have for all of us? Prepare yourself, for the journey through Tencent's story promises to be quite extraordinary. If you happen to pass by Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg, their presence would likely be unmistakable. However, when it comes to Tencent's founder and CEO, despite leading such a vast and powerful corporation, it is quite possible you have never come across him before. He is known by the name Pony in English. This next guest is the founder and CEO of Tencent. Pony happens to be his real Chinese name. Since his surname translates to horse in English, he adopted the nickname Pony as a humorous touch. The limited public knowledge about Pony Ma and his life is largely intentional. Tencent carefully walks a fine line between satisfying both China and the rest of the world, a balancing act that is incredibly difficult. Given this challenge, the company prefers to stay silent rather than spark controversy or media uproar. Another reason we know very little about Pony Ma is his personality. Unlike his rival Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, Pony is a reserved individual who shuns the spotlight. This has been true since his childhood, as young Pony Ma was a quiet boy who mostly kept to himself. Throughout his school years, he remained largely unnoticed. The only time he attracted significant attention was when he hacked into his university's computer systems and gained a reputation as an exceptional programmer. For his university thesis, he developed software capable of predicting stock price trends. This program proved so valuable that at the age of 22, he sold it to the company where he was interning for an amount roughly 3 times his yearly salary. By the time Pony finished college, the internet was still in its early infancy. Although quite rudimentary back then, Pony felt inspired by its possibilities and began brainstorming business ventures to leverage this exciting new technology. Nevertheless, despite Pony's undisputed talent and dedication as a programmer, the foundation of his future business empire was not born from a groundbreaking original concept created by him. Here comes the first uncomfortable truth about Tencent. The company was initially launched by simply copying someone else's idea, and as will soon become clear, this approach has remained a core element of Tencent's business strategy ever since. The story began when one day Pony was surfing the web and came across a platform named ICQ, an internet chat service that was quite revolutionary at that time. It was essentially the first widely used instant messaging system on the internet, allowing any 2 people online to engage in private conversations in real time. In 1998, Tencent was started by 3 of his school friends who created their own imitation chat platform aimed specifically at the Chinese audience. In China at that time, copying successful Western services was a common trend. For instance, Boo mimicked Google, Alibaba followed eBay's model, Weibo resembled Twitter, and Tencent took inspiration from ICQ. To show just how close Tencent's chat service was to ICQ, They named it OQ by simply adding the letter O in front of the original name. At first, Tencent's future seemed uncertain. They rented the cheapest workspace available in a noisy area crowded with street vendors selling counterfeit electronics. Their office was a small room oddly decorated with a disco ball hanging from the ceiling. Despite these humble beginnings, Tencent managed to customize their chat service OQ to fit the needs of the Chinese market very well. One notable adaptation was optimizing for China's sluggish internet speeds during the 1990s. Most chat programs were large and took forever to download, but Tencent ensured their software had a much smaller file size, allowing faster downloads. Unlike other chat programs that only allowed messaging with known contacts, OQ enabled users to connect with strangers if they wished. This feature laid the groundwork for its future evolution into a social networking platform. However, initially, only a few people were even aware of OQ's existence. Pony himself later confessed that when users first started arriving, nobody was active in the chat room. He had to keep them engaged by talking with them. At times, he even changed his profile picture and pretended to be a girl so that the CEO was essentially chatting with random people, hoping they would enjoy the service enough to continue using it. To be honest, this was more of a side project for Tencent in its early days. Pony initially dedicated most of his effort to developing software that connected pages, or bleepers, as they were also called on the internet. Unfortunately, that concept was not progressing, and Pony felt relieved one evening when he logged into their chat app and noticed a sudden increase in users. 2 months later, they had reached 500 users. And after that point, the number of users began to grow more rapidly each month because people in China started sharing the app with their friends and family. Very soon, the app was expanding so quickly that it became Tencent's main priority. They abandoned the pager idea completely and committed fully to the chat app. Thousands of users were joining every day, so one might think Pony was ecstatic. However, he was actually more stressed than ever before due to three significant problems. Firstly, servers in China were costly, and they kept having to purchase more to handle the load, which was especially troublesome because of the second issue. Tencent was not making money. The chat app was skyrocketing in popularity, but it was not monetized, so they were actually losing money as they grew. The number of users grew rapidly, but then came the worst challenge. The third major problem appeared one day in 1999, around 9 months after launching OQ. Pony received a thick envelope in the mail from America. It was a letter from the lawyers representing AOL, a large American corporation that owned the original ICQ chat software, which Tencent had copied. The letter claimed Tencent was violating intellectual property rights and demanded that Tencent immediately cease using the OQ name. By that time, OQ had reached 1 million users and was expanding fast. However, Tencent did not have the financial resources to fight a lawsuit. They had very little money, in fact. Most of the small Tencent team was juggling freelance jobs on the side just to cover the increasing server expenses. They were putting in exhausting hours, overwhelmed by stress. Ultimately, Pony decided to try selling the company. Surprisingly, despite the poor revenue and legal troubles, no one showed interest. Potential buyers kept saying they could not see how OQ would generate enough income to survive long-term. Then Pony discovered the idea of venture capital investors who look for companies that may not yet be profitable but hold immense future promise. Once Pony understood this, he started reaching out to VC firms. He secured a meeting with IDG Capital, China's most recognized venture capital fund. During the pitch, Pony took an unconventional approach by being brutally honest. He told IDG, "If you don't," and then continued with his candid explanation. "Fund us immediately, Tencent might not survive. Even if you provide funding, the future remains uncertain." Pony also confessed they were unsure about how to generate income from their chat application. However, he did understand that millions of people in China enjoyed using it, and that it possessed potential value. You might expect investors to be unimpressed by this, yet surprisingly, IDG Capital agreed to invest in Tencent. Years later, one of IDG's decision-makers stated that Pony's complete transparency, contrasting with the usual arrogance and false assurances many founders display, convinced them. This honesty made him appear as a realistic and trustworthy person, which encouraged their investment. Thus, IDG Capital and another venture capital firm collectively contributed $2,200,000 for 40% ownership in Tencent's company. It would not be an exaggeration to say that without this deal, Tencent likely would not exist today. They were almost out of funds, and after the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, investments in internet startups that were losing cash nearly stopped. Fortunately for Tencent, they received the financing just at the right moment, allowing operations to continue. However, the legal threat from AOL still loomed, forcing Pony to shut down the OICQ domain names and rename their chat platform. Eventually, Pony settled on the name QQ, resolving the legal issue. With sufficient investment secured, their future was looking more hopeful. The user base kept expanding at an astonishing pace. After surpassing 1 million users in the first year, they reached 50 million by the second year as more and more individuals in China shared the application with others so that everyone could chat. Tencent had skillfully transformed the original ICQ chat platform to better suit the preferences of Chinese consumers. However, one challenge remained, which was generating revenue. You might assume that having a large number of users would make monetization straightforward, but during the early 2000s on the internet in China, that was not the case. Pony experimented with various methods to earn money, including placing banner advertisements on QQ, selling QQ's chat software to businesses, and charging a small subscription fee to access the service. Unfortunately, each of these attempts failed, and the membership fee strategy was particularly disastrous. People in China strongly disliked the concept of paying to use any internet service, which allowed some rivals to attract users away from Tencent. When QQ celebrated its third anniversary in 2003, Pony removed the subscription charge and made QQ completely free again. However, revenue still needed to be generated somehow. Fortunately, around that period, some Tencent employees came across a Korean website called seclub.com, where users could create personalized avatars with customizable looks and attire. This feature was extremely popular in Korea. Inspired by this, Tencent once again adapted a successful concept from abroad and introduced their own avatar creation tool inside QQ, which they named QQ Show. Tencent offered Chinese citizens a unique way to express themselves by creating personalized characters to represent their profiles. For a very modest fee, users could purchase designer clothing, accessories, and styles for their avatars. Although acquiring these items cost only a few cents, it was practically free. Yet the small transactions accumulated quickly. This feature swiftly gained popularity, particularly among younger users, as avatars became a symbol of status. It worked remarkably well because many people had started using QQ as a dating platform, connecting with strangers and chatting casually. The avatar functionality allowed individuals to showcase their personality and, in some cases, demonstrate wealth by buying the most expensive virtual items. Meanwhile, Tencent's chat software QQ began generating revenue from selling these digital goods. The user base soared past 100 million users in China, marking a major milestone. Interestingly, the founder of the service met his future wife through QQ. For about 3 months, they chatted before meeting in person. Amusingly, at the start of their conversations, she had no clue she was talking to the creator of the platform. She reportedly messaged him asking, "Who are you?" And he replied, "I'm Penguin Dad," a playful nod to Tencent's penguin mascot. She responded, "Then I'm Penguin Mom," and that marked the beginning of their relationship. 6 months after meeting face-to-face, they were together. Unfortunately for Pony, the joy was destined to be brief, since he had no idea that his company was on the brink of a fierce battle against a colossal enterprise worth $100 billion. In the year 2004, Microsoft launched a chat platform called MSN in China, directly challenging Tencent's QQ. Microsoft's immense wealth and vast resources were intimidating for Tencent, especially as Microsoft invested heavily in the massive Chinese market. Unlike QQ, which seemed more casual, MSN was more polished and professional, attracting both businesses and students. It quickly gained popularity in Chinese offices, steadily eroding QQ's market position. Tencent, however, had one significant edge over Microsoft. MSN's operations were slower due to a rigid corporate bureaucracy requiring approval from its American headquarters before making any major moves. For instance, MSN's China team proposed allowing users to receive messages offline and view them later, yet the idea was dismissed. Meanwhile, Tencent incorporated this feature within weeks, and it became extremely popular. By this stage, Tencent had grown into a considerably large company, yet they still operated with the agility of a nimble startup. This approach meant that their applications were somewhat glitchy and faced occasional problems. However, they managed to introduce new features at a rapid pace, gather immediate user feedback, and continuously fix bugs with frequent updates. One significant challenge for Microsoft's MSN Chat was their initial decision to store all data on US servers. In contrast, Tencent's QQ chat service utilized local Chinese servers, making it much faster and more responsive. The most critical error for MSN occurred when they integrated their chat service into the MSN Live platform, which confused users. Suddenly, accessing chat required visiting a website, adding unnecessary complexity to the process. Despite possessing more resources, MSN ultimately lost the competition against Tencent. For Microsoft, China was never a top priority, as they were more focused on battling Google within the United States. Meanwhile, Tencent concentrated solely on the Chinese market, allowing them to commit fully. This victory against a larger rival marked a pivotal moment for Tencent. After overcoming Microsoft, they went on to dominate the chat market in China, with approximately 500 million users by late 2005. Their overwhelming success laid the foundation for Pony's broader ambitions. Tencent envisioned itself not just as a leading chat platform, but as a comprehensive network of interconnected internet services. Offering such services would significantly increase the difficulty for others to enter the market and compete effectively, so Tencent started incorporating various additional features into QQ, such as providing access to news. Observing Tencent's rapid growth, a South African firm called Naspers decided to invest $32 million in Tencent, becoming its largest shareholder. In fact, they remain the biggest shareholder to this day, which has resulted in one of the highest investment returns ever recorded. When Naspers initially invested in Tencent, this infusion of capital provided Pony with the resources needed to move forward with the next phase of his ambitious plan, and this is when things began to become truly remarkable. Tencent noticed that many users engaged with QQ primarily while playing games, as friends could communicate seamlessly during gameplay. Recognizing this, Tencent aimed to expand by acquiring and developing games of their own, capitalizing on their already large and active user base. Within just 1 year after incorporating gaming into QQ, Tencent's annual revenue increased by $50 million. The company's swift growth in the gaming industry was greatly supported by being based in China, where the internet is regulated by the Great Firewall. This firewall restricts access to numerous foreign websites that the Chinese government prefers its citizens not to see, including popular platforms like Facebook and YouTube. The government's motivation behind this restriction is mainly to control and censor the information available to the population. This happens not only because the Chinese government wants to, but also because it aims to support domestic companies. Consequently, in many sectors, China enforces a rule that foreign firms must collaborate with a local Chinese company to sell their goods or services within the country. This policy allowed Tencent to easily join forces with creators of successful games abroad and then modify and distribute these games to the Chinese audience. Such licensing agreements enabled Tencent to generate substantial revenue quickly without even developing any games themselves. They simply partnered with popular foreign game developers, introduced their games to the Chinese market, and leveraged their enormous WeChat user base. Since international companies depended on finding a Chinese collaborator to access the Chinese market, Tencent held significant bargaining power and an unfair advantage in negotiations. Game developers seeking to enter China's vast population needed a local ally, preferably Tencent, which stood out due to its massive user base. One story showcasing Tencent's influence comes from the American game developer Zynga. During negotiations with Tencent, a former Zynga employee explained that talks would drag on for months. When it reached the final stages of the contract, Tencent would suddenly change all the terms at the last moment. This strategy was a deliberate business tactic to exhaust the other party and gain the upper hand. Tencent not only acted as a partner, but also engaged in licensing agreements. They created games for the Chinese market and developed some of their own titles too. Usually this involved copying straightforward games that were successful elsewhere. For instance, QQ Speed drew heavy inspiration from Mario Karts. This strategy proved more profitable than mere licensing because they retained all the earnings themselves while taking minimal risks by adapting proven game concepts to suit China. However, due to the significant lack of enforcement against digital piracy in China, Tencent noticed that since people were not buying games up front and were freely sharing them, it made sense to offer games for free. Instead, they chose to generate revenue through in-game purchases like extra lives, features, and upgrades. Today, microtransactions in games are common, but Tencent was among the pioneers to aggressively promote this model, which paid off well. Their income soared as monetization methods succeeded. In 2004, Tencent went public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, gaining substantial funds that enabled them to invest heavily in expansion and growth. This growth was largely fueled by Tencent's corporate culture. Most Chinese technology firms are infamous for their demanding work hours, often called the 996 schedule, meaning employees work from 9 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, 6 days per week. This intense routine certainly played a role in Tencent's rapid development. Countless hours of unpaid overtime are common. This practice is against the law, yet the government often overlooks it because such long working hours are what built China's major tech companies. One employee at a top Chinese tech giant began his workday at 8 in the morning and was expected to finish at 8 in the evening. However, he noted that no one wanted to be the first to leave, as doing so would mean being considered unprofessional. The atmosphere was intense, especially at Tencent, where internal meetings frequently stretched beyond midnight. The company also maintained a rigorous recruitment process since Pony believed that having 5 highly skilled team members was far more valuable than a group of 50 less committed individuals. He stressed that even a single team member who underperforms or lacks dedication could lower morale and bring down the productivity of the entire team. Furthermore, after competing with Microsoft, Pony made a significant cultural decision to guarantee that nearly everyone in the company had the freedom to suggest new ideas and work on different projects. Instead of maintaining a separate research and development division, every employee was encouraged to innovate. Consequently, the entire Tencent workforce was actively watching the market for new apps and concepts they could adapt and integrate into QQ. Pony himself admitted in an interview at the time, "I do not blindly innovate. The most intelligent approach is to learn from the best examples and then try to surpass them." He also highlighted that this strategy was precisely what American technology giants like Microsoft and Google had followed. In China, the environment was truly like the Wild West, where anyone could openly imitate others without any safeguards. To be honest, this was not a one-sided situation because Tencent frequently copied others, and in return, many copied Tencent as well. However, Tencent's QQ software had the advantage of reaching hundreds of millions of Chinese users, allowing them to channel attention toward their new features, which gave them a significant edge. Over time, Tencent developed a notorious image as a ruthless imitator. Its reputation declined so much that it became involved in a widespread media scandal where people openly criticized and accused them of copyright infringement. Tencent's standing took an even harder knock after clashing with a security firm named Kai, which marketed a well-known antivirus product called 360 Safeguard. Tencent aimed to enter the security sector and developed a strikingly similar program to Key's, naming it QQ Doctor. Because they could effortlessly embed QQ Doctor into the already immensely popular QQ platform, they quickly captured approximately 40% of the security software market in China. In response, Kai launched an aggressive media campaign accusing Tencent of invading users' privacy by accessing personal data and files without consent. Tencent responded by suing Kai, but this strategy backfired in public opinion, making Tencent appear as a large corporation trying to suppress a smaller competitor unjustly. A smaller company faced legal threats instead of proving their innocence. Then Tencent made a daring decision. They informed users that the software from KI was incompatible with QQ, forcing users to decide whether to keep KI's security software or maintain their favorite chat app that connected them to all their friends and family. Users could not use both at the same time, because if QQ detected KI 360 Safeguard on the system, QQ would stop working. This risky strategy by Tencent paid off as the company understood that most users were too attached to QQ to give it up. Consequently, KI mostly lost users while people simply switched to QQ's antivirus program, which was quite similar anyway. This marked another triumph for Tencent and demonstrated how quickly they could introduce a new internet service and almost instantly dominate the market. Media coverage began calling it the Tencent empire out of control since this action was clearly monopolistic by effectively preventing users from utilizing a competitor's product. Surprisingly, the Chinese government showed no desire to intervene and appeared content to watch Tencent grow unchecked. The reasons for this would only become clear later. Without any regulations or laws to restrict them, Tencent's revenue surged from $200 million to $2.9 billion between 2005 and 2010. As Tencent kept expanding in China, launching additional internet services and leveraging QQ's enormous user base, their influence continued to grow steadily. Eventually, they understood that a fresh approach was necessary for some time. Tencent had simply been attempting to develop everything at once, competing in numerous sectors and creating imitations of various internet services just to see what would succeed. Essentially, they aimed to compete everywhere instead of focusing on their core strengths. Tencent's greatest advantage was leveraging its QQ messaging platform, which had hundreds of millions of users, to drive traffic to other areas such as news and gaming. As their reputation for copying worsened, one Tencent executive remarked, "There are many talented entrepreneurs outside, and if you make every single one of them your adversary, it will harm the company. You cannot hire those entrepreneurs anyway, so what can you do?" Investment turned out to be the best way to gain a share of their success. Thus, Tencent shifted its approach towards investing in Chinese companies rather than always attempting to compete directly and eliminate them. For instance, Tencent paid $448 million for 36.5% of China's third largest search engine and integrated their own search product with it instead of competing. Tencent was now ready to support a leader rather than handle everything alone. Essentially, Tencent's new plan was to become a startup incubator, investing in firms to acquire equity and then create a network of interconnected companies. Tencent expanded by leveraging its existing user base in infrastructure to foster growth. One notable case occurred when Tencent partnered with China's second-largest online retailer, JD.com. Since Tencent lacked direct expertise in e-commerce, they chose to support one of the leading companies in that field by acquiring equity. This approach allowed Tencent to utilize its internet traffic knowledge and financial resources to boost the success of the company they invested in. Consequently, Tencent became a powerful influencer in the market. Having Tencent's backing often guaranteed a company's success. For Tencent, this strategy greatly simplified operations as they were no longer responsible for every task internally. Soon, Tencent transformed into one of China's largest investment firms, and QQ evolved beyond a mere chat application to become a gateway for numerous internet services that Tencent either built or had stakes in. As a result, QQ appeared unstoppable. Interestingly, the app that eventually overtook QQ's popularity was also developed by Tencent. By that time, Tencent had already achieved success with QQ's desktop chat client, which had grown into a web portal featuring online games and various internet offerings. However, around 2010, mobile internet was rapidly gaining traction. Many Chinese users shifted to smartphones rather than traditional computers. Pony grew concerned that this mobile transition might enable a new startup to challenge their dominance. To safeguard their position, Tencent took deliberate action. Tencent needed to establish this new startup. Internally within Tencent, Pony Ma formed three distinct teams dedicated to developing a new mobile messaging application. These teams not only competed against each other, but also faced competition from Tencent's existing desktop app named QQ. This internal rivalry is a common practice at Tencent. In fact, the company's culture has been likened to a shark womb, where unborn sharks consume their siblings to guarantee their survival. Essentially, rather than relying on a single team, Tencent allows multiple groups to work on the same idea, such as a mobile chat app in this case, with only the strongest project moving forward. As Pony Ma himself explained, you either wait for someone else to kill you or act first yourself. Tencent started working on their mobile app aiming to replicate WhatsApp, launching a free platform that enabled users to send messages to contacts using Wi-Fi or mobile data. Interestingly, Tencent initially attempted to purchase WhatsApp for $10 billion instead of building a new product from scratch. However, because Pony Ma had to undergo back surgery, the negotiations were delayed. During this period, Mark Zuckerberg quickly acquired WhatsApp for $19 billion. Some speculate that the possibility of Tencent buying WhatsApp pushed Zuckerberg to finalize the deal more rapidly. After the agreement with WhatsApp was unsuccessful, Tencent chose to continue with their own chat applications, which they began developing in January 2011. Tencent introduced WeChat, which in China is called Weiyan, unlike QQ that was originally created for desktop use. WeChat, on the other hand, was designed exclusively for mobile devices. Initially, it did not become an instant sensation on Apple platforms, but it started gaining popularity in China when Tencent integrated a feature called Push to Talk. This function enabled users to easily record a voice message that was automatically converted into text. This innovation quickly became highly favored among users. Yet it was actually imitated from an app named TalkBox. At first, Tencent had approached TalkBox with an offer to buy the company, but when negotiations failed, Tencent decided to duplicate TalkBox's app within WeChat independently and eventually outperform TalkBox using their greater resources. In the years that followed, many Chinese companies understood that an approach from Tencent was essentially an offer that could not be rejected. Entrepreneurs faced a choice: either sell their company to Tencent or see their business crushed by Tencent's copying and competition. Selling at least meant some financial gain. When Pony was asked about this practice during a conference in China, he explained, "In America, when you launch an idea, you usually have several months before rivals appear, allowing you to secure a considerable share of the market. In China, there can be hundreds of competitors emerging within the first hours of releasing a product. Ideas are not as important as execution." With its growing momentum in China, WeChat was no longer just a messaging app. Much like Tencent's approach with QQ, the company aimed to develop WeChat into something far beyond simple chat functionality. The fact is, WeChat was a mobile application that people would constantly carry with them, no matter where they went. Pony quickly understood that the range of services that could be linked to WeChat seemed endless. For instance, within WeChat's platform, Tencent launched a feature called Moments, which was basically their take on Facebook or Instagram, a live social media stream showcasing posts, pictures, and articles. After its success, they introduced a blogging tool named Public Accounts, allowing users to create articles that could then be shared on Moments. Additionally, there were official accounts that enabled publishers to distribute content and businesses to promote their products and services. This would be similar to subscribing to a newsletter. But since emails were not widely used in China, people preferred following brands directly through WeChat. By the year 2012, WeChat already had 100 million users, despite having started only a year earlier. This made it the fastest social media expansion ever recorded, taking merely 433 days to reach 100 million users. To put this in perspective, Facebook took about 5 years to reach that milestone. By 2013, WeChat had grown to 300 million users. The secret behind WeChat's ultimate supremacy in China was Tencent's continuous addition of more features within the same application. For example, they included fun options like Drift Bottle, a feature designed to help users discover new friends or potential romantic partners. Users could drop a voice message or a text into a virtual bottle and send it out into the digital ocean to be picked up by strangers. The concept involves sending a message inside a virtual bottle into a digital space, followed by a random toss. Another user would then find it and decide if they wanted to respond or throw it back for someone else to receive. This feature gained significant popularity, with numerous individuals in China forming authentic friendships and relationships through it. For some, it even evolved into a platform for casual encounters. Tencent developed Friends Nearby with a similar idea, acting as an early Tinder-like service that contributed to WeChat's rapid growth. One of the most significant advancements for WeChat happened somewhat unexpectedly. In China, it is customary to give red envelopes or packets containing money during the Lunar New Year as a charitable act. WeChat integrated a red packet function, allowing users to send these digital envelopes with real money during the holiday. More than 75 million red packets were exchanged via the app. This success made Tencent realize that mobile payments represented the future. What began as a fun seasonal feature turned into the foundation for WeChat Pay, their own mobile payment service enabling users to transfer funds electronically. Eventually, WeChat's wallet feature expanded beyond peer-to-peer transactions, becoming a method to pay for goods in stores and virtually anywhere money exchange was necessary. Instead of carrying physical credit or debit cards, people found it far more convenient to rely on this digital payment method for everyday purchases, revolutionizing how money was handled in daily life. Since users' bank accounts were already linked, WeChat would not request cash payments because very few people in China actually use physical money these days. In fact, even if someone did offer cash, it might be rejected as many places no longer handle it. While this might seem like an obvious feature now, when it launched in China in the year 2013, mobile payments were groundbreaking and significantly boosted WeChat's popularity, especially as smartphones became widespread. Over time, WeChat surpassed QQ, though both originated as messaging platforms managed by Tencent. WeChat's mobile-first design was a key advantage as mobile use expanded rapidly across China. By the year 2015, WeChat had exceeded 500 million users. Although the app's name stayed the same, messaging is now only a small part of its enormous functionality. This brings us to the most important aspect of WeChat, the feature that transformed it into the all-encompassing platform it is today, deeply integrated into nearly everyone's daily routine in China. In January 2017, WeChat introduced mini programs. These allow users to access tens of thousands of applications inside WeChat itself without the need for an external app store. For instance, rather than downloading separate apps for every restaurant, hotel, or store, these businesses offer mini programs directly within WeChat. This innovative system enabled WeChat to link itself more closely with users' offline activities as well. Although it functions online, WeChat acts as a universal application, often described as the all-in-one app. Even before this, Tencent developed numerous services integrated into WeChat, such as payments, games, and dating. However, the introduction of the mini program feature created a situation where having other apps on your phone became almost unnecessary. This is because services from various companies became accessible directly through WeChat. For example, China's leading ride-hailing service, Didi, has its own mini program inside WeChat. So if you need a taxi, there is no requirement for a separate application. Similarly, there are many programs for food delivery, parcel tracking, and just about any other service you might imagine. To illustrate this, picture yourself as a Chinese resident meeting a friend for dinner. You contact them through WeChat to finalize the arrangements. Then you use WeChat to book a taxi to the restaurant. During the ride, you can pass the time by playing games or reading the news within the app. You share your location with your friend via WeChat and access the restaurant's mini program through the same platform. This allows you to browse their menu, take a photo of your meal, and post it on your social feed, all within WeChat. You settle the bill using WeChat's payment option. Later, if you decide to watch a movie, you simply book tickets through WeChat as well. Imagine life without a smartphone entirely. And in China, that would be the reality without WeChat. I believe I have used the name WeChat quite a lot, but this is the essence of the experience. The introduction of this mini program feature has transformed Tencent into the central gateway for other businesses entering the market. Since people rarely need to visit the App Store anymore, with WeChat containing everything within its ecosystem, companies are almost compelled to collaborate with Tencent so their services can be accessed. This dynamic allows Tencent to effectively levy a fee on all companies by taking a cut of the earnings generated through their mini programs. WeChat serves as a hub linked to other enterprises, so when users navigate from WeChat to another app or website and make a purchase, the payment is processed within WeChat itself. What is fascinating is that an all-in-one platform like this has also been proposed outside of China. Recently, Elon Musk mentioned creating X, a super app that would resemble WeChat. In China, WeChat is more than just an app. It is an essential part of daily life that fulfills a multitude of needs. Outside China, there is nothing comparable. While such an app would be extremely convenient, the idea was quickly dismissed due to existing worries about big technology and social media companies having too much control. This context helps explain why Tencent has become such a financial powerhouse. Unlike many major tech companies in the West, such as Facebook and Google, Tencent does not rely heavily on advertising income. In fact, some Tencent employees poke fun at Facebook's business model, considering it outdated. A Tencent worker once said, "When you have a billion," and the thought continues there, highlighting the contrast in strategies. When building a user base, the last thing you should focus on is finding ways to bombard them with countless advertisements. Instead, your priority ought to be maintaining user satisfaction to prevent driving them away due to irritation. This is precisely what stands out about WeChat. Not a personal name, so not replaced, as it has preserved a clean, straightforward interface without overwhelming users with ads. It does not rely on ad revenue because it earns enormous amounts from small charges on millions of daily transactions. As WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced, touches so many parts of people's daily lives in China, with over 1 billion users, these minor fees accumulate into substantial profits. If I were to describe how vital WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced is to me, I would say it touches almost every aspect of my existence. Essentially, anyone I know below the age of 70 in China uses it regularly. This app offers support for virtually every part of everyday life in China. However, despite WeChat's, not a personal name, so not replaced dominance within China, you might wonder why it enjoys limited popularity outside its borders. Although exact figures are not confirmed, estimates suggest there might be up to 100 million users beyond China, which is respectable but only a small portion compared to the vast user base inside China. Most international users tend to be Chinese expatriates or individuals needing to communicate with others in China. With WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced, being so essential domestically, why has it not gained similar traction globally? Why has the rest of the world embraced it, yet Tencent does not expand as much in other countries? This is where the situation becomes complex. The straightforward explanation is that the very reason Tencent's apps enjoy immense popularity in China is exactly why they fail to achieve similar success elsewhere. It is crucial to examine Tencent's intricate connection with the Chinese government before understanding its current ties with the CCP. In 1979, the then Chinese leader designated a region called Shenzhen as the initial experimental zone for his new economic reforms. This marked the first part of China where capitalist business practices were permitted, setting in motion the country's rapid rise to global prominence. Today, Shenzhen is often called the Silicon Valley of China, home to many leading tech firms, including Tencent. The Chinese government essentially aimed to grant some companies significant freedom as long as they contributed positively to the nation's overall interests. When firms like Tencent and Alibaba harnessed the internet to amass vast user bases, China welcomed their dominance. These companies could grow without strict regulation, provided they benefited China and the CCP. This strategy elevated China's image internationally and showcased Chinese entrepreneurial success through these hugely influential corporations. Moreover, it reduced the role of foreign competitors, enabling domestic giants to flourish within the system. Companies thriving in China like major American technology giants could not dominate locally because the government required foreign firms to collaborate with domestic Chinese companies. The Chinese Communist Party understood that if certain domestic companies grew into vast empires, they would then have the ability to invest widely both within China and globally, indirectly granting the country significant influence worldwide and control over the desired narrative. For the Chinese government, Tencent offered an attractive opportunity since access to enormous amounts of data greatly facilitated surveillance, censorship, and insight into the mindset of its population. Healthcare workers who were the first to alert about the pandemic before it was even name-face communication censorship. WeChat frequently blocks accounts discussing topics such as the pandemic or human rights violations in Xinjiang. My father was threatened directly. If your daughter does not stop raising human rights issues, we will persecute your family as during the Cultural Revolution. After accounts are blocked, users report police questioning them. The problem is that the app is essential for daily life in China, making it impossible for people to give it up. China largely preferred not to intervene directly and allowed Tencent to expand its dominance, even though it occasionally employed unfair competition tactics. Naturally, the Chinese Communist Party kept a cautious eye on these developments. The influence Tencent holds is considerable, which explains why their relationship with the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, is more complex than it may first appear. Tencent understands the importance of staying closely connected to the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, and receives clear reminders that if it ceases to be useful to the Chinese government, its power can just as easily be revoked. Now let us explore what this alliance actually involves. Tencent's position is that to comply with China's legal framework and regulatory demands, it can process and manage private data without requiring user consent in specific scenarios. One such scenario occurs if the Chinese government requests access. The CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, is said to have a direct communication line to Tencent's product managers and can demand deletions or monitor designated accounts and certain phrases both in public and private communications whenever it wishes. A particularly intimidating policy shift came in 2017 when group administrators on WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced, were held personally responsible for anything shared within their groups. Many administrators responded by simply shutting down their groups. Additionally, Tencent provides data to China's social credit system, which can influence citizens' opportunities and freedoms. This information includes payment history, real-time location, and social connections, enabling the government to build an extremely detailed profile of individuals, their purchases, and behaviors. This allows authorities to assign each individual a score reflecting their trustworthiness as a citizen. Citizens are under constant surveillance by facial recognition cameras capable of identifying a person instantly. The Chinese government is also known for compiling information collected from banks, private enterprises, and state agencies to evaluate whether an individual is considered a good or bad citizen. A favorable rating grants advantages, while a poor rating results in the loss of certain rights. Public shaming is common for those deemed untrustworthy, with their personal details and even home addresses displayed prominently on large screens. Among those affected was a journalist named Liu, who got too close to exposing corruption within senior party officials. He found himself blacklisted after trying to buy a train ticket and being informed he was banned from traveling. As Tencent expanded, it appears the CCP's demands intensified. Tencent now reportedly employs hundreds, perhaps thousands of censors dedicated to censoring posts critical of the government. The company started removing significantly more content and suspending accounts that crossed unspecified boundaries. Numerous creators, such as blogger Laura Leanne, who once had hundreds of thousands of followers, saw their accounts deleted without any prior notice after making a comment disliked by the CCP, resulting in a complete loss of income. While Chinese citizens clearly appreciate the convenience of WeChat, which is undeniably a highly useful app, there remains an underlying awareness that every action and remark is recorded, a fact the CCP makes no effort to conceal. Regardless of the specific Tencent users involved, the Chinese government has access to all the data, which is remarkable considering that more than 1 billion people have willingly given up every element of their privacy and freedom of expression in exchange for convenience. There is even a humorous saying in China that if you place too many food orders through WeChat, the police might start following you, suspecting you of sheltering criminals. To be fair, I do not truly believe Tencent intended to build a surveillance tool for the government. The company was actually launched by entrepreneurs aiming to create a successful business venture like any other. However, their product became so widely used that the Chinese Communist Party, not a personal name, so not replaced, would only permit it to exist with some degree of government oversight. Tencent found itself with hardly any alternative but to comply with these demands. Pony is known as a practical entrepreneur who understands the necessity of maintaining good relations with the authorities. This was evident when a journalist questioned him at a technology conference about content censorship. Pony appeared to agree with the government's stance, stating, "Many people believe they have the right to speak freely and act without responsibility, but I believe that is mistaken." Of course, it is impossible to know Pony's genuine personal views, but he must be fully aware of the consequences if he ever openly opposed the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced. Additionally, Chinese law mandates that all organizations must surrender user information upon official requests. In fact, it has been revealed that numerous firms in China have a designated office within their main premises, referred to as the Internet Security Police Room, where authorities can oversee digital activities closely. Public security authorities have the power to interfere with company activities or monitor specific users. This raises the question of why WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced, is not more popular outside China. Tencent certainly made efforts to expand internationally. They offer an English version of their application and launched significant promotional campaigns, including an advertisement featuring Messi to attract global users. The ad emphasized WeChat as a new way to connect with free downloads, free voice, and text messaging with the slogan, "We love, we share WeChat." However, one of the primary reasons for its limited success abroad is clearly linked to surveillance and censorship. Research conducted by Citizen Lab revealed that the Chinese government monitors and filters private information transmitted through Tencent's apps, even for users outside China. For instance, a story circulated about a person who shared news regarding pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong within a private group chat, but was puzzled when no one replied. She later understood that her messages were invisible to others because private chats were silently subjected to censorship. Any sensitive topics, such as references to Tiananmen Square or Tibet, are filtered on Tencent's platforms regardless of the user's location. In essence, using Tencent's app outside of China does not guarantee protection from data requests by the Chinese Communist Party. Not a personal name, so not replaced. Tencent remains obligated to comply with the CCP's demands to retain favor within China's regulatory environment. Many individuals naturally feel some concern about a single company, especially one linked to the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, which holds extensive information about all facets of their lives. While surveillance and censorship allowed Tencent to become a dominant force in China, this also meant the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, permitted their expansion. However, this has scared away users outside China, although it is not the only factor behind WeChat's limited popularity beyond Chinese borders. Another reason is that each country has distinct requirements. WeChat thrives because it is perfectly customized for China, but for it to succeed elsewhere, every nation would require a unique version of WeChat with services tailored to their specific needs. Furthermore, given China's vast market, it was more logical for Tencent to focus deeply on this area where they already had significant momentum, rather than spreading resources thin by starting over in foreign countries. China's population exceeds 1,400,000,000 people, more than 4 times the entire population of the United States. The downside of emphasizing China meant Tencent missed the first-mover advantage in other countries. If WeChat aimed to increase its presence in places like the United States, it would face fierce competition from numerous established companies whose apps are deeply embedded in daily life. Lastly, the reason WeChat struggles internationally also lies in historical context, making it difficult for the app to gain widespread acceptance abroad. Chinese technology companies often face difficulties when trying to expand beyond China, just as American corporations encounter challenges operating within the Chinese market. One remarkable exception in recent years is TikTok, a Chinese application that genuinely succeeded in achieving a worldwide presence. This story brings us to one of Tencent's most intriguing competitions. In China, when a business grows beyond a certain scale, it usually must either sell to or collaborate with one of the 3 giants of the industry: Baidu, Alibaba, or Tencent. However, TikTok and its parent company ByteDance stood out as a unique exception to this rule. If you have watched my earlier video covering TikTok's rise, you will know that major Western social media companies such as Facebook and Google initially underestimated TikTok's potential. They overlooked the emerging threat until it was already too late, inadvertently allowing TikTok to become one of their biggest advertisers. This strategy enabled TikTok to attract hundreds of millions of users from their platforms by constantly running advertisements on YouTube and Facebook. It was only several years later that American tech giants recognized that short-form video content was a lasting trend and launched their own short video apps to compete. However, by that time, TikTok had already established itself as a major success through extensive promotion on their platforms. Tencent reacted swiftly to the threat posed by TikTok, applying their typical strategic approach. They quickly formed a large team dedicated to developing an app closely resembling TikTok's features within WeChat and launched extensive marketing campaigns to promote it. Additionally, Tencent prohibited TikTok from advertising on their platforms, aiming to limit TikTok's ability to spread through their services. This aggressive response represents one of the most fascinating battles within the Chinese tech ecosystem. Tencent abruptly began blocking links and references to TikTok on its platforms, such as WeChat. This is intriguing because when Elon Musk temporarily restricted external links to rival services within Twitter, many found it unreasonable. However, in China, such actions are typical and reflect the anti-competitive strategies that have allowed the country's largest companies to develop massive enterprises. Unfortunately for Tencent, this approach did not succeed on this occasion. TikTok's greatest asset was its machine learning algorithm, which could precisely present users with content that kept them engaged for extended periods. Once users became captivated by TikTok's algorithm, which already understood their interests and was highly customized to them, few felt motivated to switch to Tencent's imitation app. Starting again with an algorithm that was less familiar with their preferences offered little appeal. TikTok's early mover advantage consistently provided it with a competitive edge. Tensions escalated between Tencent's founder, Pony Ma, and ByteDance's founder, Zhang Yiming, when Zhang shared a screenshot showing TikTok as the world's top downloaded app. Below the image, he criticized Tencent for creating a near copy of TikTok and for prohibiting TikTok on WeChat. Pony Ma considered this public reproach unjust, stating that such practices were standard in China. He responded bluntly, "Your words can be regarded as slander." This fiery exchange attracted significant attention in China, as both CEO figures were deeply involved in the dispute. Normally calm and reserved, it was evident that no affection existed in this intense rivalry. However, watching TikTok achieve global success on such a vast scale, something that Tencent's apps like GChat have never managed, was certainly hard for Pony to accept. But wait, remember at the start of this video I mentioned Tencent had immense influence worldwide. If their most popular offerings, Q and WeChat, are not widely adopted outside China, then why is Tencent regarded as such a powerful global company with influence across the globe? To answer that, we need to explore Tencent's brilliant, broader strategy for global dominance. Pony once gathered Tencent's top executives and senior staff for a crucial meeting to design the company's strategy. This gathering has been called the Conference of the Gods because it brought together visionary minds that planned Tencent's path to domination. The choices made during that session had serious consequences, not only for China, but for the entire world. The main goal was to define Tencent's fundamental competitive strengths and determine how best to leverage them. The conclusion was straightforward. Tencent's advantages lay in commanding enormous volumes of internet traffic and financial resources, far exceeding those of competitors. From that point, the strategy became clear. The first step was to encourage other companies to create and launch their own mini-programs through Tencent's platform. WeChat enabled Tencent to capitalize on some of WeChat's user traffic. The second step involved Tencent investing funds into the most successful ventures, as Tencent possessed detailed data about which mini-programs people frequently used and how much money they were spending. Step 3 followed, where after funding specific businesses, Tencent could artificially boost traffic towards those companies, generating even higher revenue. This additional income could then be reinvested into other enterprises. In essence, Tencent had the unique ability to identify the best mini-programs, invest in them, enhance their popularity, and almost guarantee the success of their investment. No other company globally has access to such comprehensive data on user behavior, allowing insight into trending applications. Furthermore, Tencent could significantly increase the value of these investments by promoting them through WeChat. This strategy also fostered synergies among Tencent's investments. For instance, Tencent holds a notable share in Didi, China's equivalent of Uber, and uses WeChat's platform to promote Didi, giving it an unjust competitive edge in boosting the worth of Tencent's investment. Additionally, since Didi relies on WeChat Pay, Tencent profits from transaction fees on every payment made. A similar approach was applied with the Chinese e-commerce giant JD. Once Tencent acquired a stake in JD, they greatly enhanced JD's visibility within their apps. driving more sales. Naturally, all of this proved to be exceptionally profitable for Tencent. The next stage of the strategy involved using funds generated from its lucrative ventures in China to invest in overseas enterprises, allowing Tencent to expand beyond its home market. This expansion is crucial for Tencent because if their entire operation remained confined to China, they would be completely vulnerable to the Chinese government's influence. Therefore, Tencent has acquired or invested in hundreds of firms across various sectors outside of China, building a vast global portfolio. For instance, Tencent became one of the major stakeholders in Tesla and also purchased shares in platforms like Reddit and Discord. This expansion sparked some controversy and concerns among observers. Critics argue that if Tencent has access to a company's data, so does the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, which could allow them to subtly steer decisions in these international businesses and thereby influence Western culture. Given that the Chinese government employs these apps for surveillance domestically, it raises the possibility that users in the United States could be similarly monitored. Although this idea might sound extreme, it is not beyond feasibility. One only needs to recall the example from the NBA, where a coach retracted his remarks and apologized following pressure from Tencent and China. However, Tencent generally appears to adopt a hands-off approach with the companies they invest in abroad, typically holding an equity stake without excessive interference. Up to now, they have maintained this strategy, but some critics remain wary of Tencent's true intentions. Tencent has basically shifted away from innovation and now functions primarily as a massive investment fund that channels money earned from its apps in China into promising companies overseas instead of creating many new or unique products themselves. They do not seem very invested in building their brand internationally either. For example, the Tencent Twitter account was actually suspended because someone was holding the handle with a bio saying, "Daddy Tencent, come and buy my accounts." They were hoping Tencent would purchase the Twitter handle, but Tencent has not put much effort into expanding their brand globally. They prefer to quietly invest in foreign markets without making it a major focus. One of Tencent's most profitable sectors has been gaming. The gaming industry generated approximately $176 billion in revenue in the year 2021, which is nearly 5 times the size of the movie industry's box office earnings. Tencent is now one of the dominant forces in this market. Even in Tencent's early history, they experimented with creating games themselves, particularly mobile games. Their game Honor of Kings is so popular in China that there is actually a black market where individuals pay others to play on their behalf and improve their rankings. Like many things in China, this game is linked to WeChat, so some people pay skilled players to boost their game statistics since it has become somewhat of a social and status symbol. However, most of Tencent's original video games were often designed specifically for the Chinese market, frequently including Chinese propaganda to satisfy the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced. It soon became apparent to Tencent that instead of trying to push their own games internationally, it was smarter to find promising games, invest significant amounts of money to help them expand rapidly, and in return, acquire a stake in these companies. Consequently, Tencent holds investments in studios that produce some of the biggest global titles such as League of Legends, Fortnite, World of Warcraft, Clash of Clans, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and the mobile Call of Duty. They also join forces with Roblox to introduce its games to the Chinese audience. However, 2 of Tencent's most critical investments involve buying full ownership of Riot Games and acquiring 40% of Epic Games, one of the world's most valuable startups. This not only secured their involvement in some of the most widely played games worldwide, but also gave them a foothold in Epic Games' Unreal Engine, which is acclaimed as the most advanced real-time 3-dimensional creation tool available and is used across various projects. While Tencent's stakes in international gaming companies have proved extremely profitable, they have also attracted some negative attention. Many players observed that after Tencent acquired several popular games, there appeared to be an increase in updates and unlockable content within these titles that demanded extra payments. Some attributed this trend to Tencent's greed, as they used their influence to push more monetization inside the games. Clearly, they were seeking to expand further. Microtransactions had become standard practice in China. Another conflict emerged after Tencent acquired Riot Games because they aimed to transform their most popular title, League of Legends, into a mobile game to generate even more revenue. However, the game developers were against this. It never aligned with their vision for the game, and since it was their creation, they believed the matter was settled. Later on, they discovered that Tencent had secretly created a copycat game, which became known as Honor of Kings. One Riot Games employee remarked, "We were shocked that they shamelessly copied our intellectual property." To make matters worse, Tencent even employed well-known League of Legends players to advertise their new game, leading many to mistakenly believe Riot Games was involved, even though they were not. In fairness to Tencent, they were correct in thinking a mobile adaptation would be widely successful. By the end of 2017, Honor of Kings, a game inspired by League of Legends, had become the most popular mobile game in China. That same year, Tencent surpassed Facebook to become the fifth largest publicly traded company worldwide. Their flagship applications in China were more dominant than ever, and their international internet investments were enormously profitable. This extended Tencent's influence across the globe. It must be acknowledged that nowadays Tencent excels in discovering innovative methods of monetization. For instance, Tencent, Tencent's video platform, essentially their version of Netflix, now inserts additional advertisements into movies and television series that were not present in the originals, such as placing extra billboards and signs in the background. Tencent's cloud hosting business has also become highly lucrative. Similar to how Amazon Web Services initially began hosting their own services before expanding to offer hosting to others, Tencent followed this very profitable path. Furthermore, as if Tencent's dominance was not already sufficient, the outbreak of COVID-19 actually boosted their revenue significantly. With more people spending time on their phones at home, usage of their services and games increased substantially. Tencent generated $86 billion in revenue in 2021 alone, with $35 billion of net profit, securing its position among the most profitable companies globally. It might seem that Tencent's success story could not be stopped. Many investors believe this as Tencent's market capitalization neared $1 trillion US. However, in 2020, Tencent suddenly encountered much more intense scrutiny. Unexpectedly, Donald Trump began threatening to ban WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced, and other Chinese applications. The former president acted on his warnings to clamp down on two popular Chinese-owned social media platforms, signing executive orders that banned TikTok and WeChat from operating in the United States. The justification provided was that the Chinese Communist Party, not a personal name, so not replaced, might exploit these platforms to steal users' private data, censor content critical of China, and assist in spreading propaganda. Naturally, these concerns sparked considerable debate and opposition. The political reasons behind the crackdown on Chinese apps and the subsequent executive order to prohibit them in the United States remain significant. Even under the Biden administration, investigations persist into these Chinese applications to determine if they pose a national security threat warranting a ban. Consequently, Tencent, as one of China's largest corporations, found itself unexpectedly thrust into the global spotlight. It may have taken some time, but people appeared to be finally acknowledging the extent of influence Tencent and China exert. Fortunately for Tencent, their approach of acquiring minority stakes in foreign companies offered substantial protection. For instance, even if the United States wanted to act against Tencent, it would not ban apps like Credit or Discord merely because Tencent invested heavily in them. The primary concern was the banning of apps wholly owned and developed by Tencent, such as WeChat. But since most of WeChat's users reside within China, Pony recognized that the negative coverage in the US would not severely damage Tencent's empire. Overall, as long as Tencent maintained a good relationship with the Chinese government, everything should proceed smoothly. He felt a wave of relief, believing things might turn out all right after all. However, quite suddenly, Pony's worst fears came true. Tencent has faced numerous business conflicts before. It has battled Chinese competitors like Kuaishou and major American corporations such as Microsoft, and even political conflicts such as those with the US government. Yet there was one adversary Tencent definitely did not want to confront, an enemy capable of truly defeating them, which was the Chinese government. Hey everyone, before we continue with the story, I want to ask if you find these videos engaging. Please consider enabling notifications for Magnets Media. I am currently working on some major projects, so hitting the notification bell now will ensure you do not miss them. Also, I want to express a huge thank you for watching this channel, as these videos take a great deal of time to produce. So I genuinely appreciate all your comments and support. Thank you so much for everything. Now let us return to the story. Music. In the year 2018, rumors about shifts in government policy began circulating. Then suddenly Chinese regulators stopped approving any new game releases. The CCP explained that they believed children were becoming addicted to video games and expressed worries about the violence present in some titles. One government report even called online games a form of spiritual opium. When the CCP announced restrictions limiting those under 18 to no more than 3 hours of gaming each week, the stock price of Tencent plummeted immediately. Later that same year, Tencent experienced a drop in profits for the first time in over 10 years, mainly because they could not launch or generate revenue from new games due to these regulations. The new government regulations compelled Tencent to implement significant adjustments. For instance, Tencent introduced facial recognition technology in their games and started utilizing police records to confirm users' identities and ages. This approach helped guarantee that players engaged only with games suitable for their age group and prevented excessive gaming time. Additionally, Tencent was required to modify the content of some games to reflect the values promoted by the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced. One of their most famous titles, PUBG, originally featured 100 players fighting until a single winner remained. However, Tencent completely transformed this game, rebranding it as Game for Peace. The storyline shifted to focus on patriotic fighters, with all violent elements removed. Blood was substituted with green liquid, and when a character was shot, they simply waved goodbye and vanished. The game included numerous banners showcasing nationalist slogans and patriotic messages. Essentially, the game underwent thorough censorship, turning into a propaganda tool. Although many gamers disliked these changes, they had little option but to accept them. Tencent understood that despite its vast influence and fortune, it remained under strict control of the Chinese government. Following this, the situation deteriorated further. In October 2020, Jack Ma's company, the Ant Group, one of China's largest fintech enterprises, was getting ready for its initial public offering. The process had been fully authorized and set to proceed. Then Jack Ma delivered a major speech in which he appeared to openly challenge the Chinese government, specifically criticizing China's traditional financial sector and its regulators. Shortly after, the Ant Group's initial public offering was suddenly canceled, reportedly by command of the Chinese president himself. Following this, Jack's other company, Alibaba, became the target of an antitrust investigation, accused of engaging in monopolistic and anti-competitive behaviors. Jack Ma, once known for eagerly stepping into the spotlight through speeches, interviews, and major events, suddenly vanished. All of his scheduled public appearances were canceled, leading many to wonder whether he was effectively silenced or even still alive. It is important to note that Tencent and Alibaba have been competitors for many years, battling across numerous industries in China as the nation's two leading conglomerates. When Jack Ma spoke out and faced swift repercussions, Pony Ma might have believed he had won the battle. However, Jack's outspoken actions triggered a chain reaction that marked the beginning of widespread government crackdowns. The Chinese government did not limit its actions to Jack Ma and his businesses, but targeted all of China's major technology giants. In the year 2021, several other major Chinese tech firms, including Tencent, were slapped with enormous fines for essentially operating as monopolies. These penalties amounted to billions of dollars, signaling a significant shift as the CCP tightened its control over the tech powerhouse. For many years, these tech giants enjoyed nearly unrestricted freedom. However, the situation changed dramatically. It is unlikely that Jack's public criticism of the government directly caused what happened afterward. That incident probably served merely as the final trigger. In reality, China had been increasingly uneasy about the growing power of some of these corporations. The nation's leader frequently emphasizes the principle of common prosperity, and the tech sector undeniably contributed to a significant wealth disparity in the country. Efforts to reduce this inequality gained considerable support among the Chinese population. The Chinese government also raised concerns related to national security due to the massive amounts of data controlled by companies like Tencent. While China certainly values access to this information, allowing any single corporation to wield excessive influence could pose a threat to the nation. Consequently, besides imposing fines and forcing some executives to resign, new regulations were enacted to curtail the dominance of several tech firms. Predictably, the stock prices of many Chinese businesses fell sharply. It is estimated that about $1,500,000,000,000 in market value was eliminated from Chinese tech companies' valuations because of this crackdown. Tencent, in particular, lost more than $500 billion in market capitalization, dropping to less than half of its value since the restrictions started. Frankly, numerous observers were surprised that Tencent was targeted at all, as they were known for staying out of the spotlight. Unlike Jack Ma, who openly criticized the government, for being extremely cooperative with regulators and the government, they were always obedient to policies and never openly critical of the CCP. Not a personal name, so not replaced. Nevertheless, Tencent was certainly targeted as well. Besides undergoing anti-monopoly investigations and facing hefty fines, their new games stopped receiving approval, and the new partnerships they aimed to establish were blocked. Part of the reason might have been the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, perceived that Tencent was not doing enough to support the state. You see, China found itself in a challenging situation due to soaring rental costs, its controversial zero-COVID policy, and numerous prolonged lockdowns. Many citizens grew dissatisfied, and soon massive protests and riots erupted. It is clear some of this unrest was organized with messages spreading through Tencent apps, such as WeChat, not a personal name, so not replaced. Although Tencent employs numerous sensors to try to monitor content, managing the conversation of over 1 billion people is never straightforward. There are ways to circumvent controls, like in China, where some individuals simply hold up a blank sheet of paper as a sign of protest since it is difficult for Tencent software to identify any wrongdoing. In essence, Tencent unintentionally provided people with a platform to voice their opinions through its apps. Consequently, the government may have started viewing Tencent's dominance as less beneficial. Another reason behind all of this extends beyond Tencent specifically and relates more to the CCP, not a personal name, so not replaced, feeling that big technology companies overall had become too powerful and the government needed to reassert control. China appears to have achieved its goal by initially allowing minimal regulation. For years, Chinese companies were able to flourish with little interference. These businesses gained surveillance tools like WeChat and were encouraged to invest globally, extending China's influence beyond its borders. However, now that these objectives seem to have been met, the Chinese Communist Party, not a personal name, so not replaced, appears intent on demonstrating that even the wealthiest and most powerful entrepreneurs and corporations in China cannot operate beyond the party's authority or legal boundaries. Tencent possibly expanded too much for the government's comfort and required regulation. It is important to mention that many of the new rules and anti-monopoly laws are reasonable. Their harshness seems surprising because, for a long time, there was almost no oversight. Suddenly, within a few years, the environment transformed dramatically. Meanwhile, Pony Ma started appearing less frequently at public events and even skipped his company's annual celebration. As Tencent's valuation declined, doubts began to arise about the future of Ma's empire in business. Music. Before delving into the next stage, here is an interesting fact. When shopping online, shipping fees are the biggest reason customers leave their carts behind. So if you are selling anything on the internet, this upcoming sponsorship segment is especially relevant. Nowadays, affordable and speedy delivery has become essential. Typical customers have certain expectations, which makes it challenging for smaller e-commerce shops to compete on shipping fees and delivery speed. This is precisely where ShipStation becomes a game changer. They offer the most competitive discounts in the industry, so you never have to worry about paying too much for shipping anymore. For instance, you can access savings of up to 84% on USPS and UPS shipping rates. Besides lowering your shipping expenses, ShipStation seamlessly connects with all the places you sell online, including Amazon, eBay, Shopify, and many others. This provides a single, user-friendly dashboard to handle every order in one spot, saving you time and allowing you to deliver an enhanced experience to your clients. Keep expanding your business throughout the year with ShipStation. Visit shipstation.com/magnates today and start your free 60-day trial. That is shipstation.com/SLM magnates to begin for free now. Before diving into the concluding section exploring what lies ahead for Tencent, let's briefly revisit what has been covered so far as a quick summary could really help. Tencent began by replicating a chat application and customizing it for the Chinese audience. Then they transformed it into more of a social networking platform during the time desktop computing was rapidly rising. Tencent capitalized on the mobile internet surge and became integral to the daily lives of people in China by developing WeChat for mobile. Tencent exploited the enormous traffic flowing through QQ and WeChat to expand into other more profitable ventures such as gaming and video platforms. Their strategy against competitors involved either replicating their products or services and then channeling enormous amounts of traffic through QQ and WeChat. If that approach failed, they would acquire the company outright or purchase a significant share. Tencent consistently reinvested their earnings to either duplicate or acquire other services, often integrating them into WeChat. Over time, Tencent built an entire ecosystem of influential businesses. The reason Tencent could often engage in anti-competitive behavior and grow so rapidly was due to its connections with the Chinese government, which uses their applications for monitoring and censorship. This association reduced the attractiveness of Tencent's apps outside of China, prompting the company to invest in international enterprises like major game developers and platforms such as Reddit and Discord. Tencent evolved into one of the largest corporations worldwide. However, when China started tightening regulations on big technology firms to control their immense power, Tencent's valuation began to decline. So this brings us to the current situation. But what lies ahead? Signs of trouble have definitely appeared for Tencent. Over recent years, there have already been staff reductions, and recently Pony criticized employees for lack of effort, saying, "You are relaxing on the weekends playing basketball," while demanding much more dedication from his team. The team delivered an unusually forceful statement, but honestly, Tencent should be fine since it remains an immensely large company valued at hundreds of billions of dollars with significant influence. Although recent crackdowns may have slightly slowed down their ambitions, Tencent is still an incredibly powerful entity. WeChat continues to play a central role in the daily lives of people across China, and Tencent will keep on expanding its investments internationally. In September 2022, Tencent experienced positive news within China when it received approval for its first new game license after more than 15 months. The game, titled Health Defense, focused on public health themes and was clearly designed to align with the Chinese government's expectations. This example highlights how Tencent will likely need to maintain even closer ties with the Chinese Communist Party to avoid future complications. For instance, Tencent was one of the significant backers of the movie Top Gun: Maverick, but chose to withdraw due to worries that its storyline might upset Chinese authorities. Furthermore, Tencent collaborated with the CCP's propaganda division to promote their ideology and socialist principles, releasing a game called Clap for Xi Jinping, where players simply applaud the president to express admiration. Essentially, it is evident that Tencent is making greater efforts than ever to remain favored by the Chinese government. And frankly, they do not have much alternative. Regarding what lies ahead for Tencent, that is undoubtedly a question Pony must consider regularly. He was quick to recognize the emergence of desktop computing and equally swift to embrace the growth of mobile internet. Tencent aims to seize the next significant opportunity, whatever form it might take. For instance, some experts see the metaverse as a major element of the future, and Tencent potentially holds an even stronger position than Meta in creating these virtual worlds due to their dominance in gaming and immersive environments. However, the Chinese Communist Party, not a personal name, so not replaced, would likely insist on extensive supervision of any metaverse, which could limit Tencent's ability to develop a global platform freely. Therefore, the ongoing balancing act for Tencent to satisfy both China and the international market will persist. What cannot be disputed is that Tencent represents an extraordinary business achievement. While this video touched on some controversies involving Tencent, it is important to recognize the positive contributions they have made through the creation of immensely practical applications. This company's journey offers many valuable lessons. One famous saying resonates here: you must understand the rules of the game and then outperform everyone else.